Hey everyone, let's dive right into this explainer. Today, we're unpacking a guy who is, honestly, one of the most polarizing and fascinating figures in Karachi's recent history, Abdul Rahman Baloch, or as he's notoriously known, Rehman Dakait. We're going to explore the striking double life of a man who managed to exist as both a deeply feared underworld boss and a beloved community figure. It's a pretty wild story of crime, politics, and survival. Now, to really grasp the sheer scale of the threat this guy posed to authorities, just look at the bounty on his head, 5 million Pakistani rupees. That massive sum was slapped squarely on him by the Sindh government. I mean, you don't get a bounty of that magnitude for being a low-level operator, right? It tells us right out of the gate that Rehman Dakait was a top-tier target. Taking him out of the picture was a major priority for the state. And that bounty? Yeah, it was there for a very good reason. Looking at official records, Rehman was accused of being involved in over 100 crimes. We're talking about a rap sheet that essentially reads like a complete guide to organized crime. You've got Dakoti, which is armed banditry, murder, attempted murder, drug trafficking, kidnapping for ransom, illegal arms trafficking, the whole shebang. So the bottom line is, we are absolutely dealing with a ruthless gang leader who ran an incredibly vast and violent enterprise. But, and here is the massive paradox of this explainer, despite that horrifying list of crimes, his legacy is deeply complicated. When Rehman died, thousands of people flooded the streets for his funeral. Thousands. Why? Because to his own community, he was actually viewed as this Robin Hood-like figure. He was famous for taking the wealth he earned from those very criminal activities and distributing it directly among the poor in his neighborhood. So how on earth does a wanted violent criminal become a savior to the folks living next door? Well, to figure that out, we have to look at exactly where this paradox was born. Which brings us to Section 1, Born into the Underworld, the environment of Lyari. Look, everything in this story begins and ends in Lyari. It is one of the oldest, most densely packed, and honestly least developed areas in all of Karachi, mostly home to a Baloch population. But what's really crucial to understand here is the decades of sheer institutional neglect. In fact, it became a hub for crime shortly after Pakistan's independence back in 1947. And it's a classic sociological reality, isn't it? When a place is completely starved of basic state development and infrastructure, it creates a massive vacuum. And organized crime is always more than happy to step in and fill that void. It was right in the middle of this exact environment that Rehman was born in 1975. But he wasn't just born into Lyari. He was literally born into the criminal underworld. His dad, an Iranian Balochi who went by Dawdle, along with Rehman's uncle Sheru, had actually been running drug smuggling operations since 1964. So crime was quite literally the family business. But wow, the plot thickens drastically. Later on in life, a bitter rival gang leader named Iqbal Babu Dakait shockingly claimed to be Rahman's actual biological father. This incredibly toxic and deeply personal rivalry would end up setting the stage for some unimaginable violence. Let's move to Section 2, Bloodshed and Gang Wars. The rise of Rehman. His violent rise was incredibly fast. The gang wars were practically boiling over in Lyari, heavily fueled by all these illegal arms flooding into Karachi during the 1980s Afghan jihad. By his teens, Rahman was already pushing drugs and reportedly had a guy stabbed when he was just 13. He ends up teaming up with a mentor named Haji Lalu to fight Babu Dakait. But take a look at 1995. According to the Sindh police, at just 20 years old, Rahman murdered his own mother. The local rumors around this are incredibly dark. People say he killed her in a fit of rage after Babu Dakait claimed they had an affair, basically taunting Rahman about being his real father. The chaos just kept spinning. In '96, Babu suffers a stroke, and Rahman gets arrested. But just a year later, in 1997, Rahman escapes police custody right out of a transport van and is back on the streets. Following that escape, his mentor's gang got heavily into kidnapping and extortion. But there really is no honor among thieves. Members started double-crossing each other left and right. The ultimate fracture happened when Haji Lalu was arrested in 2001. The whole syndicate violently splintered into two warring factions. You've got Rehman forming his own Balo gang and his former mentor's son, Arshad Papu, taking control of the Pathan gang. This split was the spark for an absolutely massive gang war. But for Rehman, it was a golden opportunity. He used this conflict to rapidly expand his influence way outside the borders of Lyari, pushing into areas like Malir and Karangi, essentially battling other underworld bosses for control of the entire city. Moving on to Section 3, the political pivot, the People's Amen Committee. Right around here, Rehman started rebranding himself. He stopped acting like just a street thug and began introducing himself as Sardar Abdul Rehman Baloch, a political figure. He established the People's Aman Committee. Now, the stated goal of this committee sounded super noble: control the decades-old gang wars and ensure peacekeeping in Lyari. But the actual day-to-day reality told a very different story. The committee was basically an organized vehicle to lock down territorial control for his gang and run systematic extortion rackets. It was a highly sophisticated evolution of his criminal empire, all neatly disguised as community service. And this evolution gave him immense power. The Aman Committee associated itself with the ruling Pakistan People's Party, or PPP. Suddenly, Rahman is highly influential in local Karachi politics and business circles. According to the sources, the committee enjoyed serious political patronage from the party, which gave Rahman a layer of protection and influence he just never had as a mere gang boss. Now, to be perfectly clear, the PPP leadership officially denied having any connection whatsoever to him or his organization. But regardless of official statements, his reach was now extending far beyond the alleys of Lyari and straight into the corridors of power. And that brings us to Section 4, Arrest, Death, and Legacy, the fall of Rehman Dakait. By now, state forces had been desperately trying to contain the violence in Lyari, creating task forces that repeatedly failed. But eventually, the net started to close. Step 1, in November 2008, he's arrested in Quetta. And get this, protests actually erupted outside the Karachi Press Club demanding his release. That's the kind of political clout he had. And yep, he managed to escape custody yet again. But step 2, on August 9, 2019, his luck finally runs dry. He and 3 companions are intercepted by a highly regarded police officer, SP Chaudhry Aslam Khan. Step 3, what followed was a late-night shootout. Rehman and his guys were critically injured in the firefight and ultimately died on the way to the hospital. However, the official narrative of a standard shootout was almost immediately challenged. Massive allegations surfaced claiming that his death was actually a fake police encounter, basically an extrajudicial killing orchestrated by the state to eliminate a problem they just couldn't solve in the courts. Adding a ton of weight to these allegations, a Pakistani politician named Zulfikar Mirza later went public, claimed responsibility for getting Rehman killed, and surprisingly even expressed regret over it. It really highlights the incredibly murky, legally ambiguous nature of his final moments. But even with Rehman gone, the infrastructure he built was way too entrenched to just vanish. The violence became generational. His cousin, Uzair Baloch, took the reins of the Oman Committee, strengthening it even further before his own arrest in 2015. And look at his sons. Rehman had something like 17 children across 3 marriages. In 2024, his son Sarban Baloch, wanted for murder, drugs, and kidnapping, was actually shot dead by police in South Karachi. And bringing us right up to the present timeline, in February 2026, another son, Gibran Baloch, described by police as a habitual criminal, was arrested with illegal weapons. The legacy of bloodshed long outlived the man himself. But here's one of the absolute wildest twists to his legacy: his leap into pop culture. His life was so cinematic, so filled with these crazy contradictions, that he became a central character in the 2025 Bollywood film Durandar, where he was played by actor Akshay Khanna. The movie's portrayal sparked huge reactions and a million different perspectives from audiences. It really proves that even decades later, people are still fascinated, still trying to decode exactly who Rehman Dakait really was and what he represented. Ultimately, Rehman Dakait was a product of his environment, a glaring symptom of a much larger systemic failure in Lyari. When you look at the thousands weeping at his funeral, you see a savior. When you look at the 100+ criminal charges and the massive trail of generational violence left by his successors, you see a ruthless kingpin. But the real takeaway here leaves us with a pretty chilling thought. As long as institutional neglect leaves a vacuum, someone is always going to step up to claim the crown. So, what do you think? Was Rehman Dakait a kingpin or a savior?